Are you sick of hearing about luxury fashion? Good. So is almost everyone else. The mystique of consuming luxury goods seems to be over. It's never been less cool to show off a luxury logo. That's why Huckberry are the sponsors of this video and not Gucci, but more on that later. We're gonna look at some data to show luxury fashion is declining, some reasons as to why, and in the age of post-luxury, what is actually cool. This is Animal Shelter here. Let's say goodbye to luxury fashion. You're probably aware of LVMH. They're a top 50 company in the world by market cap, owning a variety of luxury brands. Now, historically, this has been a pretty safe business. High price point allows for good margins. Brand history is leveraged by marketing campaigns to keep those brands desirable generation after generation. And perceived quality makes cheaper alternatives appear inferior. Even during recessions, the typical consumer of Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Dior has the resources to keep spending. In some cases, even using that as a leverage to increase their wealth, right when others are forced to cut back. LVMH has made the Arnault family a very reasonable and normal amount of money, with profits just going up and up and up. Until now. Statista reports a pretty chunky drop in profits last year, nearly 20%, and they missed their Q1 sales target, showing a 3% decline instead of the 2% rise they predicted. One of LVMH's biggest rivals, Kering, owners of Gucci, are not faring much better. They saw a 14% revenue drop of Q1 this year, and Gucci in particular saw a 51% drop in operating profit year on year. People do not want to buy that brand. Both conglomerates are selling off brands and stores in China, a market that has been a huge growth area for them. Another piece of data I found quite interesting was the Q1 list index. They use plenty of analysis, including sales data and social media trends, to put together a report on which brands and pieces are coolest. Now, typically this is very luxury focused, and indeed the top 5 brands are all traditional luxury ones. But at number 6, gaining more positions than any other, is COS, a far more accessible retailer which focuses far more on cut and cohesive aesthetics than it does luxury prices and status signaling. We also see On entering the index, whose brand is completely built around sports and performance, not luxury at all. On the individual pieces, numbers 2 and 3 have Adidas and Puma sneakers, COS barrel leg jeans at number 6, and at number 8 there's Uniqlo socks of all things. A $4 clothing item is one of the 10 hottest products right now. Luxury brands could never. Luxury is losing its luster. People do not want to buy it, and anecdotally, new season luxury seems to be getting less interest and fewer people seem to be wearing it. That's good for us. I'd rather cool fashion be on the more affordable end of the spectrum, or at least a little bit more attainable than this. My God. We can see what's happening. The more interesting question for us to explore is why. Traditionally, luxury was held up partly on the belief that the physical product was better construction techniques, more premium materials, made in small quantities by highly skilled teams of artisans. That made them worth buying, and it made those luxury labels worth something to people. Recently though, that belief has started coming undone a little bit. People are more and more aware that these big luxury brands are still using global supply chains, large-scale manufacturing.
Yarn will be milled in one place, dyed in another country, spun and knitted in a third country, then in pieces, and then sent to Italy or sent to France. And
recently, Dior and Armani were investigated for using manufacturers with sweatshop-like conditions. A Wall Street Journal investigation concluded that a Dior book bag, retailing for nearly $3,000, cost about $57 to manufacture. And once you know that, it's very difficult to claim that you're buying that product purely based on its quality. Indeed, several social media accounts are dedicated to assessing the quality of luxury products like Shift Fashion Group and Tanner Leatherstein. And these quantify the vague claims of craftsmanship made by these luxury brands, and in many cases, they're found to be mediocre at best.
Lots of loose thread. This fabric's actively deteriorating.
Not worth it. Save your coins, my friends.
A related trend that we discussed earlier this year was the rise of dupe culture, with brands like Quince popularizing the narrative that by removing the luxury logos, you can get a very similar product at a far more affordable price. The Chinese factory fiasco a couple of months ago was just another wave changing public perception. Ironically, most of these videos were complete lies and intended to sell fake goods under the guise that, oh, they're all made in the same factory.
People want to believe that luxury brands make every single product in China, to the point where they're not looking at dates, they're believing everything that they see. It's insane. It's insane.
But when most people watch that content and believe it, the public perception shifts even further into those luxury brands just not being worth buying. But I don't think it's all about quality. I see a big creative dissatisfaction with these types of luxury brands too. One comment on a FT article about Kering's new CEO put it pretty well. They devalued Gucci's brand by slapping horrible GG logos on everything from t-shirts to trainers, and then marketed those god-awful products to aspirational buyers plodding around the Costa del Essex. Hardly an appealing sight to be associated with for someone looking to lay down some serious cash on haute couture. Essentially, a creative devaluation of the brand by expecting the logo, not the product design, to do the heavy lifting. Over at Louis Vuitton, Pharrell's creative direction has had some mixed reception and put off some long-term fans of the brand. In Balenciaga, they had a new creative director, but that didn't really seem to do that much from an excitement or hype perspective. Within Kering and LVMH, there have been loads of creative director and C-suite changes. It's as if these brands are kind of scrambling to try and make something work. They're just not the actions of brands which feel secure and comfortable in their growth and current trajectory. It's telling that Jonathan Anderson's success on his own brand and at Loewe has landed him with everything Dior, to the point he's now overseeing an enormous amount of collections and has put his own brand kind of on hiatus a little bit. The industry is like, this guy's actually getting people to buy stuff, quick, put him in charge of everything. Looking at sneakers recently in particular, and maybe it is time for a summer sneakers video, I get the general sense that luxury brands are kind of doing their own version of things that have already been popular in the market rather than driving creativity and new ideas forward. That's maybe indicative of a wider creative slump or just difficulty in predicting what it is customers want. Why am I so far away? Let's come a little closer. That's better. Now, while I mentioned these luxury brands being somewhat recession-proof, that is changing. That's certainly the case in the Chinese market, which has been a massive area of growth for these brands. And to reference that FT comment again, luxury brands targeting aspirational buyers with the high-margin products like t-shirts, fragrances, accessories might be great for business, but those new customers are more price-sensitive and more affected by recessions. Recently, for US buyers, uncertainty around tariffs is likely to cause further impacts. Most luxury goods are made in Europe and China, and now there's greater costs associated with buying products from those regions. Of course, you can onshore manufacture to the US, but that takes time and it doesn't always go well, as we saw with Louis Vuitton's Texas factory. It probably won't surprise you to know that this video's paid sponsor is not a heritage luxury retailer, but it is one that might help us understand what is interesting in this age of post-luxury. It's Huckberry, and I picked out this work jacket that they made in collaboration with Ford. Let's go take a proper look. The thing I like about this is the branding is not aspirational, it's not a wealth flex, it's about authenticity and cultural connection. We talk a lot about how do you elevate clothing when it comes to fashion. You know, how do you elevate a work jacket? And they're not making it ultra luxurious or ultra expensive, but giving it a reason to exist with that Ford branding. We see this and imagine it being used by a mechanic at a Ford garage or workshop, not someone trying to show off. And for that reason, it's only going to look better the more it's used. You don't have to worry about getting this thing mucky. The thing I like about Huckberry is it is this one-stop men's shop for people who like adventures and cool clothing. That's why they stock a mixture of classic and performance brands from Double RL to Hoka. They stock a bunch of Merzbischwannen, for example, like this t-shirt here, a brand which provides value based on the construction quality, the materials, rather than any kind of branding. And yeah, they have received a huge amount of attention recently, but they nonetheless are only really stocked by more enthusiast or more specialist retailers. You have to care. You have to have dived into fashion a little bit. Their in-house brand tees do something similar, albeit at a more affordable price. You guys really liked the surplus boxy tee that I showed off at the last video. Well, those are on sale now, making those a really good price. But I've been wearing a lot in the rest of this video, the slub pocket tee. That takes a very different approach, which is really nice for summer. It's made in the USA with this worn-in feeling lightweight cotton. It's super wearable, it's good price to performance. It's the most similar thing I have to this North Face purple label tee that I bought in Japan nearly a decade ago and have worn and washed loads of times. I also really liked their Proof 72-hour tee they sent a couple of months ago, so I got them to send me another one. And this is the slim fit version, which is great for those small top, big pant fits. Merino tees I think look great. That sheen gives them a modern performance-focused look, and they're super comfy. Great for travel or anything a little bit more higher output. If you know about merino tees, you know. If the idea of a curated clothing and gear store with good but unpretentious clothing appeals, then I would 100% recommend Huckberry. You've probably seen me wearing some of their stuff outside of sponsored content, so I genuinely have been enjoying it. And I'm very happy to have them on the channel. There'll be some links to some of my recent picks in the description. Go check them out, especially the tees. You just can't go wrong. Now let's head home and I can put that vintage slub tee back on for the rest of the video. Let's talk a little more generally. In the age of post-luxury where this type of clothing isn't interesting anymore, what is? We've already seen over the last few years overt displays of luxury are increasingly being perceived as gaudy and tacky. We've moved towards that quiet luxury, lower branded, more tasteful looking clothing. That is still very big, but when many of the most talked about brands under this aesthetic like The Row and Loro Piana are so utterly unaffordable, most people are looking a little further down the scale to brands who still claim to offer quality and tasteful personality, but at a more accessible price point. From Studio Nicholson to Sage Nation to even COS. At the same time, personal style is still very much on people's minds, wearing clothing that has some connection to the wearer where you feel like you're building your aesthetic yourself, but it's hard for things to feel so personal now that social algorithms are so powerful. There's this cultural flattening where everyone kinda sees the same stuff at the same time. We all are exposed to the hot new thing at once, and these large marketing campaigns, the big brand releases, are kind of all forced to everyone at the same time. So these mega expensive brands and these big releases are not really a rarity or anything special. We scroll through them multiple times a day, and everyone's mood board ends up looking the same. What is interesting, what has value, aren't things which require a financial investment, but things which require a time or a knowledge investment. Things which the algorithm is potentially not gonna deliver you. I've been buying various Japanese fashion mags for over a year now and love how many of you have enjoyed taking a look at them with me. Part of the reason I enjoy them, and I imagine why so many others do too, is because we're receiving information in a fundamentally different way to how we're used to. Luxury labels in these are treated no differently to smaller brands, local ones, more affordable brands. Not to mention the more lifestyle-focused pieces of content that you just wouldn't be exposed to otherwise. I think using these kinds of magazines feels valuable and intentional, and there's a few reasons for that. Here you have individual writers and editors who share their taste and culture with us, not a mysterious, engagement-hungry algorithm. There's also some effort required to extract their information. Even if you're watching the videos that I've made about them, you still need to save them, watch them back, note down the brands or pieces you find interesting to look them up later. And finally, it's up to us what we take away from these magazines. There's no, the only 5 shoes you need this summer. We need to apply our taste to decide for ourselves which things are most interesting or worth pursuing, and that can lead us down some interesting directions and allow us to build our taste and our style in a more authentic way. I started buying Go Out for the clothes, but it turned me into a Suzuki Jimny enjoyer. Don't know why, but I always find myself sitting on the floor when I read magazines. Is that just me? Interesting clothing now is stuff that you wouldn't purchase by accident. Anyone with the cash can stumble into Louis Vuitton and pick out a bag that we've all seen plenty of times before, but what a lot of people want to hear now is, oh, I picked this up from a store in Japan, or it relates to a niche community that I'm part of, or even it has a really nice feel, or the quality of the construction is genuinely really good. I know Labubus are super hated for being this viral social media hype thing, and there are plenty of other bag charms I would rather put on my accessories, but initially at least, I think they fit into this exact category. Weird little things with personality that you'd buy from blind boxes, you'd swap them from your friends, and use to indicate that you're part of what was a relatively niche community, not to signal wealth or status.
Hey, check out this Labubu I just got.
Wow, that's super cool. Check out mine.
Oh, wow, that's sick.
If you see one for the first time, you probably think, what is that? They invite some kind of curiosity. It feels like the wearer knows something that you don't. Even now, they've become such a huge cultural status symbol. If you want to buy one at retail price, you've got to know where, when, and how to get hold of it. But it's a sign of the times that people are posting $20 keychain toys alongside their multi-$1,000 bags, and it's the toys that people are getting excited about. The Louis Vuitton subreddit literally turned into a Labubu discussion forum, to the point that the mods had to make a different thread to try and funnel people over and redirect the conversation back to the Louis Vuitton brand. I've accidentally started wearing a less hyped version of this. I bought this Sony MP3 player recently as kind of an offline and a physical way of listening to music. But it works great clipped onto a belt loop, and I've got more attention from this thing than I would have if I was wearing an expensive luxury fashion accessory. And that's because you can't buy this with money. Well, you literally can. Even though it's about 20 years old, they're not that rare. You can get them on eBay. But what I mean is nobody is going to randomly buy and wear something like this. this. It requires this kind of prerequisite knowledge or interest in this kind of tech. You'd have to look up a little bit what kind of MP3 players are actually going to work now or are going to work best for you. And you got to have some conviction to make use of this when it's not a trend or a hyped viral moment. Not to mention the time investment it takes to make this work versus pressing play on Daily Mix 1. A luxury belt says I had $500 to spend on a belt. Wearing this thing though, I think says a lot more. I'm a music fan. I was part of the Y2K era of tech. I like wired, offline, physical. Not to mention the questions that it invites. You know, what exactly is it? How old is it? Is it rare or collectible? I'm not trying to sell you MP3 players here or suggest I'm some kind of visionary tastemaker for owning one, but if you follow the threads of your interests a little bit, just kind of see where they go, you might end up with something kind of interesting that other people aren't using, and I think that's pretty cool. It's no coincidence that the only luxury fashion segment not in decline is jewelry. Partly because jewelry prices have increased less quickly than other luxury fashion accessories, and partly because people see this inherent value in this stuff because the raw materials, things like gold and diamonds, are naturally expensive. Together that makes jewelry purchases feel more worthwhile, like a better investment versus other luxury clothing or accessories. But it's about more than that. Jewelry, even the luxury stuff, is rarely based on logos but design. In fact, these two pieces are pretty unusual here because they both incorporate logos in some way. But there is so much room for identity and fun. People can pick up things which really resonate with them in a way that a luxury handbag probably doesn't. And they can do that without it completely taking over an outfit. They're a little piece of personality and charm, which enhances the quiet luxury stuff that's popular at the moment, creates a little intrigue, and I think that applies whether we're talking luxury jewelry or more affordable stuff. Definitely an area to keep in mind and a great chance to inject personality into even the most minimal or low-key of outfits.
Several days later.
Hey, it's Editor Ant here. Hope you're enjoying this thing that I'm working on. If you are, hey, why not drop a like or a comment? That's super helpful for the channel and for me. But what does the luxury flop era mean for us? Well, it means less reason to cop stupidly expensive clothes and accessories, and signals the rise of clothing which evokes some kind of time or knowledge investment. Intentional fabric or construction choices, quirky hobby-derived clothing and accessories, shoes which are a little bit interesting or have a twist on the conventional while still being wearable. Those are all components which we're seeing more and more frequently in the fashion world. And all components for dressing in a more interesting way than being head to toe in heavily branded luxury gear. Question is, do you think the idea of investing time or knowledge into fashion, or indeed any other hobby, is cringe or a worthwhile exercise? I might be a little bit biased on this one, but let me know what you think. And as always, I'll catch you very soon in the next one.